And I would just say to the members of the committee that our voting election process, I consider it to be almost sacred. And that is that when I talk to moms and dads who have sent their sons and daughters overseas and they've spilled their life's blood, that I might have the right as a citizen to participate in this process. It lessens the sacrifice given by them on the battlefield when we don't have measures in place that protect that a citizen is voting. I heard it said earlier that this has not been proven, that it's not been taking place. That is such a fabrication. That's the nicest way I can say it. On September 25th, 2007, Jerry Metz, who was an Axon County Commissioner, was found guilty of registering people who were non-citizens to vote in Georgia. That's not a fabricated name. It's not a fabricated number. But if you stand behind this microphone and you tell a committee of the Georgia General Assembly that there's no record or no documentation, now either the Secretary of State's office is lying to me or you're lying. And that's for the committee to decide. But I think the Secretary of State's office has been honest with me. And that's why I produced the bill that is patterned after the law in Arizona. They can provide 7 different mechanisms. They're listed at the beginning and top of page 2 on the bill, lines 29 through line 52. Mechanisms that they can provide proof of citizenship when they register to vote. If you're already registered to vote, you do not have to provide proof of citizenship. You're grandfathered in. It would be a logistical nightmare to go back and get everyone's proof of citizenship at this point. But we can, going forward, improve our elections process. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Representative Mills. Chairman Mills. Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Mills, I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, with all due respect to the members of our citizens of our state who are here to testify against or for this bill and for the one that we saw before, how does it make you feel as the author of the bill to have groups who are supportive, who are associated with some hate groups? I mean, if we were just to talk about the politics and the ramifications of when these kinds of bills are before us, we didn't hear anybody in support of the bill, but the people in support of your bill, in support of Representative Graves' bill, but the people who are in opposition of it, in support of it, tend to be associated with some groups that are less than stellar in terms of the work that they do, in terms of the kinds of things that they espouse. And so I'm just wondering, how does that make you feel as an author when you're saying you're looking to do one thing, but the people who are associated with what you want to do are probably not the kinds of folks that you would associate with, I would assume.
Could you be a little more specific and state to me those groups that you find to be less than stellar, so I would know who you're talking about? Because nobody's even testified at this point on behalf of my bill.
Well, the issue is what I'm referring to. But, for example, there are some white supremacy groups that are in support of this issue, as an example.
Are there any white supremacy groups in here being represented? I'm not aware of any. If someone was promoting one race over another race, I would be adamantly opposed to that. What I am for, adamantly, is to protect the legal right for any citizen to be able to participate in our voting process. It is less than stellar and dishonest to stand in front of this podium and tell elected officials on this committee that there's no examples of fraudulent votes. We have people from the Secretary of State's office right here that can verify that were elected by stellar people of the state of Georgia, and that's just not true. And frankly, I just find it very disheartening that someone would make a statement like that.
I have another question, Representative.
I've got a couple of other questions. Can we?
Okay. It'll be brief, Mr. Chair. And it's really about the merits of the bill itself. So going to your logic that you kind of laid out when you were presenting the bill, you said that we do the process backwards, and people have to prove their citizenship if there is a question. And so following that logic, would you argue the same point for proving age or proving that you are not a felon? So in other words, should citizens who are wanting to register to vote have to also prove that they are not felons and should be able to vote?
Well, I think that would happen in the application process if we were to pass a House bill, substitute to House Bill 45, that is before you. It would. It's almost as Representative Oliver was questioning before about pre-clearance, wanting to make sure that something is constitutional before we put it in place. Well, if that makes sense, and it does, then wouldn't we want to sort of pre-clear somebody before we gave them the right to participate in our process when we already say you're supposed to be a citizen when you go to the polls and vote, and yet when we have facts that document people are voting in the process that are non-citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier I introduced myself as D.A. King and said I was here as a private citizen. I am also president of a nonprofit organization called the Dustin Inman Society, a fact of which I am very proud. Dustin Inman was a young man who lost his life because our borders are not secure. I came here today to talk about Representative Mills' very well thought out bill. I want to make it clear to all concerned I will not be so rude and disrespectful to the elected office of anyone in this room to tell them when or when they should not laugh. What I have done, as usually happens, is I have sat down on the end of the bench and watched discussion about whether or not we are going to equally apply a voter registration law become, I heard questions about hate groups. I've heard about anti-immigrants. I've heard someone make a big deal out of the fact that someone in the military was regarded as a non-citizen. Please know, ladies and gentlemen, as a former Marine, I can tell you that we have non-citizens in our military right now. That means absolutely nothing. Okay, it's rhetoric designed to get you to forget what we are sitting here about today, and that is to decide on the front end whether or not we are going to be proactive and apply equally a rule that when you register to vote, you simply have to prove that you are a United States citizen. A minute ago, I heard something about anti-Latino, so I'm going to repeat respectfully my point before. This is a Mexican voter ID. It has a fingerprint and everything I mentioned earlier, and I can tell you very clearly, no one in Mexico regards this as somehow anti-Latino or anti-immigrant. I'm not going to cover all my points, but again, I hope we all remember why we're sitting here. Someone mentioned that a potential voter was not English proficient, but eligible to vote because she was a citizen. Again, I have to respectfully remind somebody, or everybody, that to become a citizen, to become naturalized in this country, you have to demonstrate proficiency in English. I know this because my adopted sister is a real legal immigrant who happened to come here from Korea, as are many of my supporters. A lot of times we hear anti-immigrant when it has nothing to do with the topic, but just as a handy way to tell the difference between somebody who is an immigrant, which designates coming to this country lawfully, and someone who is not an immigrant, who did not come here lawfully, please remember, immigrants do not require amnesty. Again, I am here to support Representative Mills' bill. I hope that you can see through the smoke and mirrors that have been put up. A variety of reasons. One question that was not asked of Representative Mills when he first stood up was whether or not he still beat his wife. But I think if we sit here long enough, that will probably show up. I'm finished, Mr. Chairman. I have more to say, but I don't regard the Secretary of State's office as created a scheme. I think that they are regulating what is apparently a very sacred right, and at least a sacred privilege. And I think it's so important a privilege that people need to take the trouble to demonstrate that they are eligible to vote again before they get to the poll. Mr. Chairman, a member of my board of advisors, a lady named Inger Eberhart, got here just after, a little bit too late to sign up on the sign-up sheet. She assures me she can just show her support in 20 seconds. I would respectfully ask if we could listen to her.
Hi, thanks for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Inger Eberhart, and I'm a member of the board of the Dustin Inman Society. And I'm just asking that you vote in support of this particular bill. Thanks.